And a reminder about the language, go to the little globe and choose English or Spanish. And we will start in just a minute, just giving a bit more time for people. Some people have said to us that they're unable to come. Other people have said they might be a bit late because they're finishing other meetings. So we will have, no doubt, people joining. Do introduce yourself in the chat or say hi to colleagues in the chat so they know who you are. Wonderful. Thank you, Erica, and welcome, Elividza. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrongly, which I'm sure I am, but welcome.
No, you pronounced it great. Elividza, can you put on your camera real quickly? I don't know if you're able to, but.
And Margot, maybe we take off the slide for a minute so we can see each other.
Hi, colleagues.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you all. We are recording this meeting for the purpose of this group and note-taking. So just to let you know that it is being recorded. Welcome. So I think we will begin and let others join a little bit later. It's fantastic to see you all. We know it's a busy time. We've had a few people saying they're unable to make it, but we're really grateful that you have. We, first of all, we've lost an amazing co-convener. As you know, Michaela Costa has left Hope and Home, but is very much leading still the charge for children's rights and violence against children as part of at the European level. So we're thrilled for her and hope that we know she'll still continue to contribute. And we're also grateful for all the work she's done. We are very lucky to have Caroline Rose from Lumos, a senior advocacy advisor, who is going to step into Michaela's shoes. As you know, a lot of these convening and so on is only possible with the help of and the leadership and volunteering of members of our community. So extremely grateful to Caroline to be taking on this role as well, together with Becky and myself. So let's go into our agenda. First of all, without further ado, Margot, if you can put the slides, thank you. Today's agenda, as always, in our meeting, we spend time, first of all, to enable members of the community working in different regions to provide updates of what is happening in terms of advocacy at the regional level or in the region, but primarily at the regional level. So we have a really good sense of the various initiatives and make sure that our global advocacy connects to what's happening. This is all part of the same continuum, of course, with national advocacy. Then we're going to speak a little bit about global updates and have space around different fora and different opportunities, also different events that have happened. And then we wanted to continue the discussion we had last time at our last meeting when we started talking about strategic priorities. We did a bit of a kind of download of all the different priorities from organizations and from actors as part of that, saying these are key priorities for advocacy. And now we just wanted to start to dig down a little bit more to say, okay, well, what are the things that actually are common across organization or are actually broader than one organization's agenda, or what are the opportunities and what are some of the things we might want to do as a community at a global level together, and some of the things that might be done by a group of actors. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Becky to facilitate and contribute to the regional updates to start with.
So I will take us through our regional updates. I wanted to do a brief update on the Middle East. I think a lot of people have been reaching out to me around OPT and how we can get involved and what we should be saying as care actors. So I just wanted to give a brief update from Save the Children's side and what we've been doing, but I'm open to discussion and thoughts on that. So basically, just to quickly summarize, as you all know, it's a horrific situation. Save the Children's been working in OPT since 1953, and we've had a presence there since 1973, actively programming, and we have worked with a lot of local partners across the region. And so, you know, what we've been doing, a lot of our focus previously had been on mental health and psychosocial support, providing different access to education, et cetera, within the region. So we are well established. We have lots of different organizations that we work with within the region. But there hadn't been a focus on alternative care previously, and there was very small. I think the numbers that they're citing right now was that, according to the Ministry of Health, there were 260 girls and 278 boys in childcare institutions prior to this response, prior to October 7th. So it hadn't been a main focus of us initially, and we were looking at it as to whether or not there was a call for unaccompanied and separated children, if there's something we should be doing, but also thinking about, you know, how it is a very small area. So in terms of separation and population movement, people are stuck at the moment. So the recommendations from our country office have very much been focused on the ceasefire, focus on continuing services, and, you know, that mental health and psychosocial support should be part of our aid delivery, which we were trying to still get into the country. So that there has been a very active kind of call for a ceasefire, really looking at European and the American audience on how do we really stop the bombing from happening. I think there will be more coming out on unaccompanied and separated children. Our regional advisor, Samar, is based in Egypt, and she's done a lot of work on alternative care previously, but it's more, let's look at what the needs are for unaccompanied and separated children, and how do we prevent separation from happening. But I do think for the moment, our focus should be on this ceasefire, and also really, you know, I mean, I think a lot of our team has been trying to figure out how do we continue, you know, to get funding in, given the rates of this. It's just, you know, institutional donors are very nervous about where the money is going, and it is a very political response. And so how do we kind of reassure people that, you know, children do need this support, and that we are working with all children, which has been quite political. So I'm open to how we address this as a care community, and how I can make sure that you are connected with the, you know, the child protection area of responsibility and other humanitarian actors, so that we could speak out, especially if there is something on unaccompanied and separated children. But that's just an update from our side. I don't know if people have questions for me at the moment, but very open to that.
And maybe just to Becky, excuse me, to what you said, that of course there's been a number of statements by the UN Secretary General, by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, among others, and they have highlighted specifically the question of the separation, of course, not just the targeting of families, but actually the impact on families having to make impossible choices, the separation, children left behind, and in addition, children with disabilities, and persons with disabilities, families and parents with disabilities, and the impact that this is having on them when they are basically unable to move and unable to. So this is clearly on the international agenda as well. But yes, the focus has been, so there's been a number of joint statements. Some of the organizations have joined. If you are, yeah, as Becky said, if you want to talk more about, the statements have been really focused, as Becky says, on the ceasefire and the protection of civilians. But if you want to know more about the statements, or maybe, as Becky said, reach out to her or to ourselves.
And you know, this is rapidly evolving, so you know, there very well might be something that we should be saying as this progresses, as access improves, and as people start moving. I mean, I think our offices in Egypt, our offices in Lebanon, everyone's preparing, because they think this is going to be there's going to be a lot of people moving as well. If there are any questions, do reach out to me directly or through the chat, etc. You know, Save the Children can be hard to navigate, so I can try and help and see what we can do on that side. I don't want to take up a lot of time on this, but yeah, feel free to reach out to me if there's any other questions. I know this is a big issue, and it's getting a lot of attention, as it should be. And just a devastating situation for everybody on the ground. Without further ado, I would like to pass over. I don't know if Chris is on the line yet.
He's having trouble. That's why I'm ringing. He's having trouble signing in, so I'm not sure whether he's managed to join. But Chris was going to give the updates of from the African Working Group. Maybe if we go to
Asia.
Yeah, Asia or Latin America first.
Okay.
And I will check to see.
Kieran, is there any updates from Asia?
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
I think, you know, in the previous meeting, BICON might have been discussed. I'm not sure, because last few times I wasn't able to join. So was it discussed? Was it, or
Yes.
should I talk about it? It was
BICON
discussed.
but maybe the update. I think you've been working on the reports, and any update follow-up.
Yeah, so the report is almost ready, and I mean, Better Care Network has really helped us in putting together the report, and I think we are going through the final version of it. It should soon be ready, and BICON committees are also undergoing some, you know, we are doing some envisioning exercises, how to take it forward. But if you talk about India, I can just inform to the group that in India, a new scheme was launched last year, which is called Mission Vatsalya, which very clearly commits itself to non-institutional care. And a recent, the last report that we had was from Government of India, where they were talking about 10,000 homes and 350,000 children in these homes. A recent report, which is not a government report, but somebody compiled it, some NGOs, and it seems, you know, now there are from 10,000, almost 6,000 children's homes are there, and even the number of children from 350,000, it is reduced considerably. And so this is a good news. But at the same time, the mindless restoration can be very harmful for the children. So and it's a big country with huge problems and huge, you know, population. And there is a big, you know, poverty line also. So we need to be very careful, you know, before restoring the children to do proper, you know, identification of the families, whether they are fit enough to be able to take care of the family, of the children. And also there has to be a lot of you know, these meetings have to happen between the family and children, and later on also there has to be a lot of hand holding. So we have started on our own. I mean, we means I, as an Udayan Care, we have started, you know, some small ventures where we are dealing with children who have been restored to the families and trying to understand what's going on and where do they need support. So similar such ventures might be happening, you know, in many other places. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Kieran? Really good news about India. Okay. Should we move on to Latin America? You can certainly also add any questions for Kieran in the chat box as we move on. Is there someone who can speak from Latin America. And remember, we do have the English and Spanish translation options.
Hi. Hello.
Welcome, Mariana.
Thank you so much. So I'll give you a brief update on the activities of the hub, the Latin American hub, composed of for Save the Children, UNICEF, RELAF, Sail, the Inter-American Institute for Children, the Latin American Network of Caregivers, and Lumos as well, representatives in the region. We've developed 3 webinars related to putting down the recommendations of the Committee of the Right of the Child for alternative care lately. The first one was on the right to live in a family environment. The second one was prevention of separation. And the third one is coming up November 27th. You'll receive the invitation, and it will be about participation. And there will be another one in March 2024 on migration and children. Some of you may know INTRAC is a global network of colleagues that study transition process from care to independent living. The Latin American chapter that's being opened in INTRAC. There's a Nordic countries chapter, also a Canadian chapter, and now we have a Latin American chapter, and it's composed of researchers mainly. And in that same sense, we in Buenos Aires will probably host the global INTRAC meeting in September 2024. And also last week in Chile, there was a seminar of the Latin American Network of Caregivers that joined young people from 11 countries of the region together to discuss with politicians and experts on what's going on in Chile in terms of the care system and how the new law in that country is really transforming or not the way children are cared by the state. That is pretty much what we have so far.
Great. Thank you, Mariana.
You're welcome.
And I also know Claudia just updated that there was that alternative care conference in Brazil, which she had come to present about, which, yeah, sounded.
That was also an important event, but I mean, it's hard to, talk about all the events going on in the region, but that was an important event in Brazil that took place 2 weeks ago so far. I was there with her, so
wonderful. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Marina, sorry, it's Florence. Can I just ask, you talked about Chile. Is that the Congress that brought the Latin American Caregivers Network?
Yes, exactly.
And can you talk a little bit about more about it? I mean, they were working, as you said, specifically on transitioning, but did anything come out of that in terms of recommendation from the Latin American network, or?
Actually, the last part of that seminar is the development of a declaration that the young people present to the authorities. In that case, there was the National Child Defender, and that is on one hand a result of the declaration taking into account what are the most urgent needs from the young people's perspective to the government in Chile. Excuse me. And also there will be a systematization of what happened in each of the discussions in the different tables that is being done by Children Villages SOS, which is part of the network in Chile. They're going to develop that, and will probably be available in the next month or so. So we could share that to you.
Thank you, that'd be great.
Okay.
And there's also an update from Erica in the chat box, working with regional bodies of the Catholic Church in Latin America. Has Chris joined yet, or should I go on to?
I think we're having trouble with Chris. Yeah, he's not able. I'm texting with him, but he's having real difficulty with his internet. So maybe we give him a bit more by going on to Europe before Africa.
Perfect. Caroline, over to you.
Thanks, Becky. So I don't have an update about Europe more broadly, and if any colleagues do have any more Europe-wide updates to give, that would be very welcome. But I can talk a little bit about the Ukraine response. So in the Ukraine Advocacy Task Force and International Advocacy Task Force under the Ukraine Children's Care Group, we've been looking particularly at influencing the EU's new facility to support Ukraine. So the EU has pledged, or is going to pledge 50 billion euros over the next few years to help complete various reforms in Ukraine. But we're very hopeful that some of that money will be used to significantly drive forward the promised care reform in Ukraine that has been a significant part, has been kind of brought forward by the government, particularly in response to the EU accession process and kind of becoming closer to European values and moving forward with deinstitutionalization and care reform in the way that other countries who've joined the European Union have in the past. So that's been a great impetus for the government, and now hopefully the EU is providing some money to back that up and to help the country to really transform its care system. We've got a sort of two-pronged advocacy approach going on, because there's an overall regulation which is managed by the EU, and that still hasn't been finalized. So there's EU level advocacy trying to influence that kind of umbrella regulation for the whole facility. But then the plan for how the facility will be spent, called the Ukraine plan, is being developed at national level then negotiated with the European Commission. So there's a prong of trying to influence the plan at national level, which is being taken forward by national organizations, and we're coordinating together to try to join the dots up and to also see if there are ways that the EU can put pressure on the national government to really meet its obligations and to actually deliver on the reform that it's been promising. There have been a few worrying signs so far that, although despite the kind of stated commitment to holistic care reform and family strengthening and strengthening the social service workforce, that some of the things that the government has been planning to spend the Ukraine facility on are much more linked to buildings, construction, these kind of small what they're calling family type children's homes, which isn't really clear whether they mean houses for foster families or something different, something that's more akin to residential care. It's not really clear, but also, yeah, we're trying to understand what the government is proposing so that we can be clear on whether that approach is coherent. At the moment, it doesn't look like it is. So we're also trying to push from the EU side to, first of all, let civil society in, have more accountability to civil society, and to really to have a transparent process. because part of the problem is that it's really hard to get information about what the government is including in the plan, because they're not systematically involving civil society and allowing them to review the draft. And then also just getting from the EU side to push as well on, you know, we've all committed to this reform, we've committed to supporting it, now we want to see you deliver it. So that's the main focus of that advocacy at the moment. And it's quite a rapidly changing situation. We're getting new information all the time, but the process for the developing the final kind of Ukraine plan, I think, is to be finalized by early next year. And then simultaneously, the government, the new National Coordination Centre for Care Reform, which was set up by the EU, is supposed to be presenting the first draft of the national strategy on the 20th of November. So we're hoping that all of those things will tie up as well, but there's a lot of kind of trying to scrutinize that process, basically. Thanks. And I think, Florence, there might be an update around adoptions as well in Ukraine.
Just briefly to say that part of the work that Ukraine Care Group and also that the task force under there that Caroline's mentioning as well is doing as well, received some kind of worrying information around the return of children, not just the return, but the adoption of children that are in Poland in what are really centers, what are residential centers. It's a little unclear, the situation around the movement of these children, who are the adoption process that's happening, what kind of oversight there is, and whether due process is being followed. It seems to be primarily adoption back into Ukraine, but it's a bit unclear in terms of have there been opportunities for parents and families, as we know many of these children have parents and families, to be informed, to provide consents for the termination, etc. So there's a lot of unclear information about that, and the Ukraine Care Group is going to be having some discussion as we're trying to understand better and also understand whether there's a need for sharing recommendation and concern about what's happening. But there's definitely quite a bit of movement happening. It's, as Caroline said, it's a pretty fluid situation. So if you are involved in Ukraine, you're interested in being part of this, please connect. And the conversation will probably, the meeting of the Ukraine Care Group is going to happen at the end of this month to discuss this. Yeah.
Any questions for Caroline? Caroline, I just had a question as to, is the coordination working well? Is there anything else that we should be doing within this group to support? I know there's been lots of information coming back and forth, and it sounds like things are rapidly evolving, but just wanted to see if there was anything else we should be doing on our side.
I mean, I think, as Florence was saying, sort of concrete information about what's happening on the ground is always really, really useful. And I think that's particularly useful with relation to the adoption issue that Florence was talking about, because we are missing some information on that. In terms of the trying to influence the overall kind of the longer term care reform process and the EU's role in that, it's what's happened, which is quite nice recently with the task force, is that we've really had a good participation from the Ukrainian organizations as well, and UCRN the Ukraine Child Rights Network have been really active. So we're managing to marry up quite well, and that's really the purpose of that task force, is like for the national organizations to for us to identify together, like where can this international group of actors help to put pressure to move the government forward. And that kind of coordination has worked really well so far. I mean, the difficulty is just that the information is changing daily on what the government's actually proposing, and because civil society haven't seen the draft of the Ukraine plan, we're just going on what we've heard from meetings that people have had with different ministers, and the information conflicts from one week to the next. So concrete information from Ukraine in any sense is always really useful. Yeah, I don't know if Florence had anything to add on that.
No, I think that's it. And I mean, colleagues from Save the Children and ISS are doing some really important work in gathering the information, trying to get better sense themselves. And of course, we're working with UNICEF as well in Ukraine. And so there's quite a bit of work. But yes, information, if you are working either in Ukraine or in Poland or Moldova across the border, and you have information on the movement of children, that would be really good. One of the challenge which is being raised by these actors on the ground is this question of lack of proper cross-border case management system. And so you can imagine with the movement of children, there is actually very little knowledge as to where the children are going, who they're going with, what kind of support is provided, so I think that's one of the big challenge and the big concern still. I think Chris has joined us.
Welcome, Chris. We've been waiting patiently for your update.
Wow.
Hear us? Yes.
Wow. So, folks, I'm going to ask. I'm actually just about to check in. There was nobody here. I'm the first. So, can I just check in and call back? I mean, and just give my update.
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I'll switch my camera on and wave. My life is all about trouble now. So, but I'm looking forward to giving my update. I'm ready, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm so sorry.
No worries. We know this is like hot off the press. So why don't we go over to the global updates, and then we'll come back to you, Chris, after you've checked in and can get a little bit more settled.
Thank you so much.
Over to you, Florence.
Oh, thank you. So global updates. The first thing I wanted to give you a bit of an update as well on what's been happening with the thematic brief. Some of you are involved, and then some of the other UN and other international advocacy efforts and opportunities. Margot, if you can go to the next slide, please. So first thing, as we announced, the first thematic brief is out, and in fact, it's already been well used in advocacy. I'll talk a little bit about the IPU resolution that was adopted. That's also why that task force was so keen. Oops, no, the other slide. Yeah, thank you. That's why the task force was so keen to have this thematic brief out. They have been using it in their advocacy. There was a lot of opportunities, both at the IPU, the Interparliamentary Union level that was working on the resolution, but also, as mentioned in our last meeting, there were two reports by, first of all, the Special Representative on Violence Against Children that was looking at violence against children and exploitation in the context of travel and tourism, and then the report from the Special Rapporteur on the sale of children that was had a specific focus on orphanage volunteering. So our colleagues presented, this brief was used very much as part of the work of these key actors, and a lot of the recommendation integrated. It's available in English and Spanish. So if you haven't seen it or you want it, and we would encourage you to use it in your own advocacy. The second good news is we have a second thematic brief that has been finalized by the working group, and it's the one on transitioning residential care services. You know, we have under the Transforming Children Care, we have a working group that's led by Andrew Poon, Rebecca Knapp, and Sully Santos as well. They created a task force to bring their recommendation together. That draft is now finalized, reviewed. They've approved it at their level. So we are sharing with you the actual drafts, as we did for the volunteering, for the Global Policy and Working Group members to go through it, review it, identify if you've got any concern, any suggestion. A reminder that we shared guidelines on commenting on the process of approval. So this group is really, if you have major concern, because clearly the work has happened at the task force level and a great deal of expertise and time has been put into this. So it's really at this stage, ensuring that there aren't any major areas of disagreements or commenting. But if you do, the document is shared, and I will share it after this meeting with the slides and everything again. So you have access to it. It's on Google Share, and you have access to make comments as well. We're asking for people to provide comments for members of the group by the 30th of November. they are also keen to have this finalized so they can use it in advocacy as well. So we will, again, the link is in there, but we will also share it with you. Oh, thank you, Margot. Margot's already shared it in the, that's where you can access the document and make comments. So please have a look at it, make sure that if you have any comments, they're reflected. And then the task force conveners will go through those and come back with either integrating them or explanation of why they haven't. So thank you in advance. Other good news, the Task Force on Social Service Workforce in Care Reform, which is a new task force, is actually holding its first meeting tomorrow. There's already lots of people that have joined. If you are interested and want to contribute to this task force that's going to be working on a thematic brief on this topic, we encourage you to reach out to the conveners and to join that meeting. Secondly, the Task Force on Systemic Approach to Care Reform, just a shout out to them. They're holding the next meeting on the 20th of November. I think Nolan is here, is one of the convener, and has been sharing a draft for discussion and input. So I don't know whether Nolan, you want to add anything at this stage, but just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, thanks, Florence. Yeah, we have a meeting of the group on the 28th of November, and the draft has been circulated with the group. If anybody would like to join the group, just please either reach out to me directly here or connect through the platform, and we'll be more than happy to share the draft with you. And we'll follow the same process as the other groups have followed. So we'll agree the text within our group, and then we'll open it up to the broader task force. So thanks.
Thank you, Nolan. And then next slide. The task force on foster care, I don't think Louise could make today, or Barbara, but I've been the co-convener of this task force that has done a very comprehensive process, as for those of you who've joined that, that included a series of meeting and webinars and consultation. They have tons of information, and they're working on drafting the thematic brief. So we should be getting a draft of that once the task force has approved it as well. Also wanted to flag the task force on transitioning from care. Now, this is individuals who are transitioning, leaving care and transitioning from care. It's a task force that's convened by care experience advocates, and it's met on a monthly basis, particularly in the last period between April and September. It's gathered a lot of resource, a lot of knowledge, and it's slowly moving towards starting to identify what they want to put in the brief. There will be consultations with actors. They will consult further with actors in the region as well. And then, of course, the draft, once the draft is in shape, will be shared. But they do want to have consultation with also non-care experience actors as well, to ensure that your input is included. At the moment, it's the task force, which is exclusively for care experience advocates and leaders. But just wanted to flag that. Then there was a task force on family strengthening, which myself and Annie at UNICEF are co-convening, and it was facilitated by consultant Alex Justa. It developed a first draft, and some of you have been asking quite rightly what's been happening with this. And actually, there was a big pause for a few months because we had issues with the availability of the consultant and so on. But we're now moving to the next stage, and a new consultant has been appointed to help facilitate the work of this task force. So it will pick up on the work that's already happened and the consultation. But the consultant is Beth Bradford, which many of you know. I'm sure that if you are interested in the task force on family strengthening, she'd be really happy to hear your contribution and to have you connect to her. So. Then finally, and there are other task forces, but these are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight. Just to flag, there's been some very initial discussion with agencies that are interested in developing a thematic brief focused on violence against children and care. As you will remember, all of these briefs are part of this kind of unpacking of the UNGA key recommendation, but also identifying areas, not just the key recommendation, they were drafted at a time for a very specific purpose, but areas where also we need to unpack our kind of advocacy toolkits with clear recommendation to policymakers that articulate a bit more than what you can put in top level resolution, but also that have country examples and that kind of identify some of the priorities of learning for policymakers. And so if you are interested in a thematic brief on violence against children and care, let us know. It's still very initial discussion, but it's likely that this is going to be one of the new task force. I think that's it in terms of task forces. I'm not sure whether there are any comments on this, but we just wanted to give you a bit of an update because we know this work is happening, but not always on top of our agenda because we have so many updates in these meetings. I see that Chris has rejoined. Is it time for Chris?
I'm ready.
Hej.
Go for it. For the African work.
Ja, absolut hjärtat, absolut. Jag sitter i... Nej, nej, det...
There you go. All right, Chris, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I thought I had... Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. My name is Christopher Mwanguzi Mugalu, and I am really here as a representative of something called the Children Without Parental Care Working Group. So we give updates often, for those who do not know us, about our advocacy in the region. This is mostly Africa. And at the moment, we have representation for this group from all regions. We're very fortunate to have at least, I think it's 2 members from each region, but we want to increase that, absolutely. So we've managed to have Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia representation. East and Southern Africa, as you know, is always very well represented. So we're not lacking there. West Africa is very well represented as well. We're working on bringing in somebody from Somalia, and also we have some representation from Ethiopia. The working group really was established to support the African Children's Expert Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which is a body of the African Union that works solely and looks at policies to do with children and child protection in Africa. So we support that committee, but actually our very specific mandate is to support one of the members of the committee, one of the expert members of the committee, a rapporteur who is also a minister in Zimbabwe. Her name is Honorable Anne Musiwa. So I'm going to tell you a bit about what happened in the last in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We attended the 42nd session, and before that really worked smart to prepare a small speech. The 42nd session was an ordinary session, so the 42nd ordinary session of the expert committee. But a very unique aspect of it is that SOS chose to launch the continental study, which I think a number of you might be aware of. So this is the African continental study. And for those who are not aware of it or don't have access, I will forward this to Florence, who I actually think has access to it. You will remember that a year ago, we were not very happy with the continental study, to say the slightest. We were concerned that it wasn't representative. It had not heard the complete voices of people working on this subject area, care reform, deinstitutionalization, and alternative care. It hadn't taken into account examples, global examples. It hadn't taken into account experiences from other regions, an understanding of the context internationally, and even advancement with UNGAR, but also the work that was done, more recently with children with disabilities. It had no reference to the Lancet report, didn't even quote or understand or reference it. And the consultants that did the piece of work themselves didn't have this background or understanding of care reform. So they had kind of done this quite blindly. As a result, they had given a representation that wasn't clear and wasn't exact. They hadn't referenced any of the examples in Rwanda. In fact, they had said Rwanda hasn't really made much progress. They hadn't referenced really well the examples in South Africa, Uganda. They hadn't taken into account what was happening in Kenya. the examples from Ethiopia, so on and so forth. And the list is endless. Those of you who have worked in the region, Tanzania, Ghana, none of this was properly referenced or listed. They had set out to do quite a bit of work with a number of countries and do some consultation, but they hadn't met that criteria, again, because of COVID, but also a lot of other issues. And because of that, we understood, but we were very concerned that they were still going ahead to launch this, this study. So I attended the validation last year, and with support from some of you on this call, we were able to put those concerns forward. They heard the concerns and they reviewed the report. But with very short notice, I'm talking about 2 to 3 days, they said they were going to launch it last week. And we gathered together and we decided we'll get on a plane. Well, we gathered together, decided would send somebody. I didn't think it would be me, but it then became me. So I went out there and represented the group. And we delivered our speech and our concerns around the report, but we also deemed limited to the concerns. We talked about what needed to be done. So I'll try and be very brief with this. We talked about the fact that the report cannot be the only reference document in this subject area, but there needed to be some more work, including learning visits, contact with others working on this subject area in Africa and outside Africa. So a lot of you in this group as well. And also a lot of learning from, the contexts where care reform has been successful, or even where it hasn't been successful, but there's been a lot of good learning. These remarks were very welcomed. The chair of the committee was very pleased, and his comments were, I'm really pleased to see this consistency in advocacy for children without parental care in Africa. I'm also pleased to see that there is solutions, not just challenges that are being highlighted. So he was very happy with that. The rapporteur also got up and spoke, and she felt very supported and called for general comment. We were really going to call for that, but we didn't think it was our place. So we referenced general comment, but she called for one, a general comment and a framework. I'm also pleased to let you know that that was welcomed by the committee. SOS made a speech. They talked about the fact that they would like to support the general comment. They would like to support this framework in Africa. We think that should be supported mostly by members of this group who are more representative than one organization. So this is not just it being SOS, it's about it being one organization. We feel that there should be a number of organizations, including SOS, in this conversation and in this support for the committee. So some key actions from that. We are meeting with Honorable Masiwa, the African Union 42nd session. The ordinary session ends on the 17th. So we're meeting with her. We had a pre-meeting, but we're meeting with her again to discuss how we can now start to plan for general comment. This working group has also managed, with support from Changing the Way We Care and CRS, to fund for 3 months a consultant to be based at the Secretariat to support Honorable Masiwa and the Secretariat to develop paperwork, to have learning, and also to work towards the general comment. I, however, and I must stress this, don't think that this consultant is the right person to support us with the general comment. So we're going to need to think about who can help us do this and do it well. We need somebody with really good understanding, really good experience. So I'm just going to call on all those organizations that have any representation at the union, who have experience, to really think about how we can get the right person to do this. So that's one big step. The next one is finding funding. It's very premature, but I've managed to speak to 3 donors who have made a commitment to fund learning visits, the general comment consultant, a couple more days, a couple more months, 4 more months for this consultant, a trip to Maseru, where the Secretariat is based, to train and talk to them about care reform. So we might call on others to come with us, because we really want to make this global. We don't want to just make this about the region. We want the region to learn, but also to share its own experiences. And then also to support the working group in its advocacy work. And I think that by December 11th, I will know for sure that this is in the bank. This means that we will have some funding that we can then go, and this is the last follow-up, because SOS is keen. They're very keen to support this. We want to go to them with some money to say, look, we've got some funding, so we're going to put some money on the table. and we can share some of these costs. So why don't we pay for the consultant for maybe another 2 years? Why don't we ensure that there's somebody to support us with a general comment very specifically? And why don't we fund the visits to the different regions? Because my understanding is the committee has been to a lot of SOS villages, but hasn't seen other kinds of care reform practice and progress. So I'm going to stop there, and I hope it's clear. I'm really sorry, I'm very distracted, but I hope this update is helpful. What I wanted you all to really understand was where we've kind of come from, where we are, and hopefully where we're going, but also to give you a real sense that there's a huge opportunity here for us to achieve something big. And if any of you feel that we're going through the priorities in the wrong way, I am really keen for us to think, what are the key priorities? What should we start with? How should we go about this? So we're not stuck in this, we're willing to listen, and we're also keen to learn. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you, Chris. Maybe if we can just take down the slide for a minute so we can see people, it would be great to have a little bit of a discussion about what Chris has said and anyone's reactions or thoughts about it. I know this is something many of you have been following closely, and it was quiet for a while, and then suddenly it came back. So, Caroline.
Thanks, Becky, and thanks so much, Chris, for that explanation. That was really comprehensive and well done on the trip. It sounds like it went really well. I just wanted to check for it might be that I missed this, but has the committee confirmed that it's going to go ahead with the general comment yet, or are you still waiting for that confirmation? And I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, it's a very good question. So the committee has not confirmed. It's the chair that has confirmed that he will prioritize this on the agenda. So we're hoping that at the end of this 42nd ordinary session, we will hear a bit more clarity as to what the committee has decided on this. But what Honorable Musiwa says to us is she has spoken to her peers and she feels that we should start planning on getting prepared to do this, because she has prioritized this as one of the things she wants to see happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chris?
Hi, it's Sev here. I'm not putting my camera, I'm calling from Ghana, and just got to the tail end of this, and I'm really, really excited to hear about those developments. Chris, I heard you said that you felt that the current consultant that is supporting the working group might need to be complemented with another consultant. Can you maybe expand on that? And you know, because initially I thought that the consultant in place for the next 3 months that could be extended potentially could be the right person to help with that, but I'm hearing that maybe not.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So 2 things to really explain here. The first is we were advised that during and after a session, particularly ones close to Christmas, a lot of things don't happen. We were very frustrated, but there's a bit of a light here. We needed to get somebody in quite quickly. We needed to ensure that there was representation from the working group in the secretariat. So this gentleman explained to us, and he explained this to us through the secretariat, that 2 things. One, a lot of these things take a long time. He has volunteered and he has worked in the secretariat before, so he has a lot of experience of the secretariat. But he also said to us, his knowledge is quite limited on this particular subject, but he has a very good understanding of how to move things in the secretariat. And indeed, he has done that for us. He's introduced us to the right people. He's ensured that we're, right on the right agenda. He gave us some really good inside information to ensure that we were better placed to make our speech, so on and so forth. And he's also supported Honorable Musiwa. So really, the reason I don't think he's best placed is his knowledge on the subject. I think he's going to need some complemented support, and I think we'll be setting ourselves up to fail, honestly, if we think that he can probably do it. But the other thing is, because it's a lot of work, so we're probably going to get him to focus on the learning visits, which I think will also be helpful for him. So getting the committee out to the various countries that we picked for them to learn from. And then also helping us to position some of the policy, because again, he has that experience. So really the reason we went ahead to put him in after he interviewed with about 3 other people is because he had the best knowledge of the Secretariat. He had volunteered there, and because we really wanted to get somebody in the door as early as possible. The benefit of that means that come January, we start with a new relationship, one that we did not have in the Secretariat, to actually advance these things. I hope that makes sense.
And Chris, I don't know if you can see the chat box, but Sev says that it was extremely helpful, your updates. Great. And I'm sure we can mobilize around, supporting around the language, wherever possible. This group seems well placed to be reached out to and to see how we can support your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That would mean a lot.
Any other question for Chris? Okay, great. With that, I'll hand over to Caroline. What we wanted to do is last time in our last call that we had, we started to talk about prioritization and thinking about what we wanted to look at in terms of our global policy and advocacy work related to care and care reform. And we wanted to think about, what does it make sense to do together? We had started with talking about our own individual organization priorities. And then what we wanted to do today is to think about what does it mean to come together as many different organizations together to support these different areas. So I will pass over to Caroline to talk you through the next steps.
Thanks very much, Becky. I am just making sure that I'm sharing the right link so people can edit. Yes, I think this is fine. So I'm just sharing in the chat now a link to a Jamboard. So, and also please excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today, so I'm a bit woolly, but I will do my best. So yeah, as Becky was saying, that this conversation leads on from. Oh, I'm wondering actually, should we share a screen? I don't know, Margot, are you able to also, I don't know what would be helpful, because everyone can enter the Jamboard, but maybe it's helpful to people to see it on screen as well.
I can do that.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
So yeah, just so in the development of this Jamboard, basically we looked at the conversation that we had last time, the priorities that people identified that they were working on in their organization, and brought out some of the key ones that either got mentioned by a few organizations or were really kind of promising as potential areas of joint work for this group. And those have been listed on the yellow post-its, and then you can see the instruction at the top. So the idea is for us to start thinking about potential kind of routes to change, or things, activities that we could actually do around these areas, because the areas themselves are quite broad. So if we can think of any kind of opportunities that are coming up linked to that, so say for example any processes at the UN or other kind of international bodies, or big events coming up perhaps, or just kind of the general processes, and to put those in a blue post-it, to put who's might be the target of this area of advocacy on a green post-it. So I've given an example at the bottom there that a few people talked about translating policy successes either at national or global level into implementation at national level. So there, a target is going to be national governments. So that's an example. And then also to add potential role for this group, so things that this group would be well placed to do, or if members of this group club together, so as opposed to kind of an individual organization on its own, put those in pink post-its, and then anything else to add in orange post-its. So we've got two main slides where we added in those kind of key topics from that were identified in the last meeting. So that's the first one here, and then the second one is just a continuation of the same thing. So we've got also post-its on climate change, social protection, investing in child protection systems, children on the move, and having institutionalization recognized as a situation of emergency. So those are all ones. Oh, thanks. That's really helpful to give the labels. Yeah. Those are all the ones that are on the second slide. And then on this first slide that you can see here, we've got finance and care reform, the intersectoral nature of care reform. So maybe reaching out to other linked sectors like education, health, the kind of things that we've talked about in the past. And sort of similarly to that, engaging with broader international development processes, like in particular the post-2030 discussions, which are starting already, and trying to get care reform on the agenda, or seeing how care reform interacts with those. And then also finally the one that I already mentioned around translating policy successes into national implementation. And then there's one final slide at the end for people to add if there's anything that's missing. So these are just a starter, and they're, like, as I said, they're the ones that really came out of the conversation that we had in the last meeting. But there might be some other areas that people have been thinking of as areas that this group could bring forward, or things that we missed from last time. So those can be added in the final slide. We could either do this that everybody sort of works individually, or we can also, if anyone wants to raise a hand or add things in comments or in the chat, or say things out loud, we can also help to add those in. So it's really just supposed to be like an initial brainstorming tool, and then the next step is for us to make that a bit more concrete and try to see how we'll take those things forward, or if anyone can lead on any of these areas. Anything to add, Florence or Becky?
No, I think
we're all physically here. I mean, it would be nice to have a verbal discussion,
yeah,
rather than us, and then people can add in additional or themselves, but it would just make it a little bit more interactive.
Yeah, so on that note, anybody, I think, oh no, in the chat it's just people who had to leave. But has anyone got anything any thoughts that they already want to share linked to any of this, or just in general thoughts that you might have had about what this group could be working on jointly, and kind of, and who we might be engaging with?
Maybe just to, if I can add, Caroline, it's not necessarily things that the group will do as a group, but it's to identify where your organizations, your partners and so on have identified that this is a real priority, and this is something that you want to work on, where in some of those cases there are huge global issues, there may be some global opportunities. So where there are opportunities where leveraging the wider group, the wider community can be helpful, then let's identify them. Where it doesn't make sense to do that, then it's just so that others know that one organization and so on are taking the lead. So we're not trying to put everything under this group. We're trying to say, well, what are some of the things? So for example, when we talk about climate change, a number of organizations have put that on the top. Well, what about climate change and care? And what are the entry points? And what are the organizations that want to work on that? Who are the targets? And can we strategically, work together on this, or is it beyond the parameters? So just to clarify, it's not that everything is going to be done by this group or needs to be done by this group.
Thanks, Florence. That was a really important clarification. Thank you. So, does anybody have any thoughts they want to share out loud? Oh, yeah, Nolan, your hand's up.
Hi, thanks. I think this is a really, really exciting idea. I think we can look at external targets, external opportunities, and we've just heard, I think, from Chris, a really good example of the kind of external opportunity. There are so many different factors coming together at the Africa level right now. I think that would be an obvious area for us to combine forces and strengthen messaging. I was thinking also about internal mechanisms and what we can do to create opportunity as well. I'm thinking particularly the thematic briefs. So we have the thematic briefs in process, and we just heard some of them are more developed than others, but they are coming together. And I think next year we'll start to see the fruit of that. But I just wonder, is there? I can imagine, if we had enough, an infinite amount of cash and capacity at our fingertips, we would want to do something to showcase these. We would want to host a webinar, a conference, a global conference on care reform. We could create opportunities based on what we as a movement are creating ourselves in terms of the briefs. So just a thought, that we shouldn't just focus on external opportunities. We should also think about creating opportunities ourselves.
Thanks, Nolan. That's really a really good point, and we'll add that in somewhere. Sorry, does someone else want to come in? I feel like there was a nope. Okay, yeah, it's yeah, you're right. And I went to a training recently where they were saying, so it was about comms, but they were saying for every pound or for every amount of time you spend in developing a message, you need to spend 3 in sharing it. And I think that applies to this as well. If it's a lot of work has gone into those thematic briefs, and you're right that there's so much potential there to do something with them. So it's worth us thinking about that, and then also thinking, I guess we have the asset now. What are the opportunities? What's out there already? Where are there kind of opportunities that we could use that? Because obviously with the voluntourism one, there was that kind of like perfect moment, that perfect opportunity coming up. So it's definitely worthwhile thinking about that. So like, for example, on the question of social protection, which is on the second slide, that was brought up by somebody, but it's also happens to be the theme of the Human Rights Council's annual Day on the Rights of the Child next year in March. So that's an actual, a concrete opportunity that's coming up. But yeah, it will be good for us to think about that and add those in.
And yeah, on that one, Caroline, just sorry to jump in. I really agree that is a huge moment for us next year. It's a really exciting way for us to get into that conversation and start to deal with some of the intersectionality issues that have been highlighted as priorities elsewhere. So all the work that can be done should be done around prevention, around gatekeeping, and so on. It's just a really interesting new forum for us to talk beyond our own echo chamber. So yeah, I'd be really interested to hear if anybody has any thoughts on how we can take that forward, because obviously it's not that long away now.
And
sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, some of these issues are very big, and broad. So I mean, I hate tying it to an event because it feels like it kind of limits what it is, and we want it to keep going. But investing in child protection systems, I think there's going to be, like, if we put our collective heads together about there's going to be a ministerial meeting in Colombia next year on ending violence against children, hosted by the WHO. And I feel like there are a whole bunch of discussions now about pathfinding countries to end violence. But part of that is about making sure that we are investing in both prevention and response. And part of that prevention is preventing separation and preventing violence in the home, which leads to separation. So it's not the whole story, but it's part of an important story. So, I'd be happy to think about it through with others about what are those possibilities where we can meaningfully link it in where it's not the entire, it's not something specifically on alternative care, but it's about the whole, system that supports children within families, which I do think, we're interested in, and something Save the Children we can try and connect with. What are those pathfinding countries? What does Dr. Najat at the SRSG VAC's office, what is she thinking in terms of making pathfinding countries more accountable to being a pathfinding country to end violence? I don't know. It's just an idea about how we connect it to sort of broader work related to violence against children.
And to add to that, Becky, I think this is where the work that's happening in many countries and that many of you are involved in terms of care reform, a lot of the work around redirecting resources towards children in families, towards supporting families and prevention. That work that's happening needs to kind of be leveraged to be used precisely for that kind of initiative, where we can show both examples of where that has happened and they're positive, and examples where that hasn't happened and the implication. So it is about linking the work that we do so that we can, as you said, so that we can ensure that we are not just event-based, we're not just opportunity-based, but we actually are building our advocacy across those opportunities that are relevant. It's not every opportunities, but they're really relevant. Because if we talk in isolation about funding for, redirecting funding from residential care, we talk in isolation of the discussion that are happening on the funding of child protection system, our ability to impact is going to be limited. We need to be part of that broader conversation as well. So how do we do that, as a community? So it could be that, as Becky says, if you are, Save the Children is leading some work on there, how do we bring our learning around the redirection of funding to those actors so that they can integrate that into their advocacy brief? Does that make sense? I know it's a different way for us of thinking in some ways, where we normally have an identified opportunity and we jump on it. There are multiple opportunities.
And then I have my other question is with the African Union, thinking about, care reform on the continent. What, Chris, the general comment, potentially documenting good practice. I'm just wondering if there's anything specifically that would also be really helpful in terms of progressing care reform, in Africa moving forward, that we should be leaning into more.
Absolutely. I was actually about to raise my hand to say, following what Florence has said, is there's such an opportunity, as I said before, for us to be doing more work in Africa. Lumos had started working on a solutions book, which I'm really keen to bring right round to get your support, this group's support, to think about how that solution book can be positioned better. So the solution book is a series of a number of organizations working in this field, writing about their context in each country. There's all the ESA work that's been done, folks, that's going external, that isn't being communicated in the region. And a lot of it is, don't get me wrong, because a lot of that was set up to communicate to governments. But there's also an opportunity I just saw here to bring our ministers in the region together, and really help them think, the children's ministers, the finance ministers. So I have a list. I mean, number one, I'm going to ask if we can be present for the duration of this meeting going forward, because I'm just sitting here, I'm hearing so much that we need to think about to ensure we progress these things. So absolutely, yes. And on this sheet, I mean, a number of those things we can link to. So absolutely, yes, yes, yes.
Thanks very much for all those inputs so far. I'm trying to capture some of the things that we're talking about in post-its, because I feel like that will be a useful way to capture these notes, but it'd be really welcome if people want to add. I think we'll share the Jamboard afterwards as well, won't we, to give people a bit more time to add into that. And I'm just seeing if anything's been added. Build narrative of prevention in the sphere of care reform along with residential care. Yeah, so the prevention side, that's something that we've been touching on when we've been talking as well about the child protection systems and the social protection. So I think that's, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Something else that we've talked about is it worth us kind of engaging again, not like led by the group necessarily, but engaging in the country review processes under the treaty bodies. So for example, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, when countries are coming up, or in the UPR process, maybe kind of pooling together resources, doing joint submissions or alternative reports. It's going to come up as and when, I think, and it depends on the country, and it will depend on different organizations' capacity to contribute on different countries, but that's something that we might want to think about doing. Sorry, I see there's a hand up. Yeah, is it Sandhya Mishra?
Yeah,
Thank you.
hi. Yeah. So, yeah, this particular sticky note on the build narrative of prevention, which I strongly feel as part of the care reform. Now we are in that position, not in one country, but I am talking about globally, where we have actually created the path from residential care to family already. And like Kiranji also said that particularly in India, the number of childcare institution also getting reduced. Maybe some other reason the children are getting into some other residential care or hostel, whatever. I'm not getting into that complex. The point which I wanted to make, that whenever we talk about care reform, always alternative care, residential care, and CCI. So somewhere as a group, I think creating that narrative itself a very important contribution, not to one continent and one region. It is for this sphere. This is what I feel as a practitioner, as a technical expert organization. We feel that way, because when the moment we talk about residential care and CCI, we leave out the players like from education, from livelihood, from rural development, from so many. So I think important to bring those policymakers, decision makers together about child protection. So that is something which I feel that could be a one step which we all, I think, discussed. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's really, really, it's really topical and relevant. It's something that that's been coming up a lot for us. I know in Lumos, and again, it was something that was raised several times in that conversation last week, is that question of the intersectoral nature and trying to really tackle some of the drivers of separation of children from families. And I think that also the question of succeeding and engaging with those sectors who are also resource strapped and trying to get lots of different things done is a big question. So Lumos did a global thematic review on education, which was released this year, and it's an area of work that we're going to carry on working on, and it was looking at the links between education and institutionalization. But we have found it challenging to engage really successfully with the education kind of sector, because they're also really busy doing getting children into education related things, and they're finding it really hard to sort of find time to do that bridging the gap work. And we found that it's quite a significant investment of time that needs to happen there. So I'm really interested to hear others' thoughts, but I think it's certainly a really important area that I think a lot of us have been talking about, an area that we need to invest in, but it's also quite challenging to get into that space. So it'd be really interesting to hear what others think. Chris, I see you've got your hand up.
I was going to agree with you, and we took a conversation with you. But here's how we've progressed it. I find that with education, actually, for from our context, you've got to find a subject area that you also commonly agree on that's not just outside what we're trying to work on, residential care, institutionalization. So the common area we found is mental wellness or mental health. So that's the bit that we found that we can address together. So from the community aspect, and how it also affects the educational aspect. So we're working with 3 particular schools and Ps in Uganda to do that. So I just wanted to share that that's where we found some success, but it's been incredibly difficult to engage them and say, look, here's our agenda, come and talk to us. The second one is children living with disabilities. So with schools or facilities that are providing specialist or alternative or accessible services, when we engage them on this agenda, they're right there. So again, an organization called Chininga that has education as part of its offer, along with all the other aspects, has joined us to partner on raising awareness and doing some work with schools around that subject. So those are the 2 things I just wanted to share with you. But I was also going to add that, I mean, I met some phenomenal lawyers working on the humanitarian side of things who were talking to me about children who have experienced trouble with the law. And we were both talking about the same subject, you know, institutionalization of children. And we talked, and then suddenly found that, look, we should stop talking and find synergies. So there is a really, really amazing organization, I'll put its name in the chat, that we want to engage with regionally. But I think that across the globe, engaging with lawyers, this subject often needs legal support, who understand how to kind of maneuver some of these very big challenges, will also be quite important. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Chris. Does anybody else have any further thoughts to add, either on that topic about linking up with other sectors, or anything else that we've touched on, or anything completely new that we've missed?
I just wanted to follow up on Sandhya's comment, and also, of course, what has been said by others. But it seems that during COVID, we had kind of obvious opportunity, which we took, but only within the COVID pandemic, to have a more intersectoral approach to care. And that's because it was so obvious that the pandemic was affecting caring more broadly, and affecting education, and affecting livelihood, and affecting housing, and so on. And so, there was an attempt to articulate better the intersectoral nature of care and bringing other actors. I know we partnered together with UNICEF, did a paper called It's Time for Care, that was looking at precisely this kind of intersectoral aspect of care, and why the pandemic has made it obvious that the work that we're doing, advocating for support for families, for services that are directed at the community level to these families, are addressing a whole bunch of issues that are not just child protection or care related. So I wonder, to Sandhya's point, have we made that narrative, or have we owned that narrative? Have we articulated it enough so that as a community, in the same way that the thematic brief are to help us have those clarity, those statements, those cases that can show the evidence, the learning, to your point about the good solution, have we articulated enough in a way that the working of the community can kind of use to build on their advocacy, what that intersectoral nature of care is, and how these different, have we got a nice narrative? And I mean nice in the sense that it's accessible, that it can be used in different contexts, that it can be adapted in different contexts. I'm not sure we have. I think we have it in different documents, but I wonder whether that's, to Sandhya's point, whether that's not something that we should either kind of build on or redo, but think of articulation of that centrality of care, but also care being more than just alternative care. And therefore, sorry, my cat, as usual, wants to get into the conversation. And so that we, is this something that, that we should be, I mean, in some ways, for example, the thematic brief on family strengthening should do some of that. But family strengthening, again, is taking it from one aspect in some ways, even though it's very wide. Should we work as to have a clear statements about that intersectorality, or with examples, or I don't know. to make the case so we can use that can be adapted. Just a suggestion, but it seems to me that we've done it in some places, but it still is, I'm not sure it still is really, maybe it's not articulated well enough, or maybe it's not relevant enough to many actors. So maybe we need to do some more work to do that. I don't know. I think there's a narrative question that we're still, and a communication question that we're still grappling with. And I'd be definitely interested in working, you know, with members on how do we address that.
Dragana, did you want to respond to that?
Thanks, Caroline. So not so much to respond to this specifically, but the issue of intersectionality and collaboration. I think we also have to go back to what we discussed about the functioning of the platform and the capacity of different members. So I think I've been consistently part of these discussions and part of disability rights groups, but we don't all have the same capacity to engage in activities, and that has to be taken into account. I think I would be probably more able to contribute more substantially to some of the processes if we had additional resources to do so. I don't know, you can consider this as a call for partnership if there are opportunities to get additional resources that we can sort of collaborate in bringing disability perspective in some of these activities. Just reach out, because definitely I would be happy to do so, but we are struggling with time and resources, and I would love nothing more than to substantially contribute if opportunity arises. So yeah, I just wanted to put this out there, and if there is such opportunity, please reach out.
Thanks very much for raising that question, and I think that's probably, it's also a general point that's worth raising about all of these. These are lots of nice ideas, but we're all organizations that are quite strapped for resources, and we're going to have to prioritize and choose and look at, so prioritize according to our capacity and also what opportunities are coming up that are not movable and that kind of thing. So I think the next step as well, so once everyone's maybe completed this with a bit more, with some more thoughts, the next step will be to prioritize and to look at some of those kind of key actions that can be brought forward, because we're not realistically, some organizations have more capacity than others, but no one has loads of capacity to do loads and loads of joint projects. So Florence, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to come in on?
Yeah, I just want to completely agree, and with Dragana's point, there is no doubt that part of it for the community is leveraging our resources. So if an organization has a resource and can lead, that's fantastic, but it also needs to bring some of the other actors that have expertise, and that means partnering. But it also means that in some cases, as Caroline said, where we prioritize and say, this is something that we think that is really the priority at the sector, at the community level, then we do need to find resources. That includes partnering with you, Dragana, and others at capturing that learning, at capturing that knowledge. So yes, absolutely, we cannot do this without resources. But in order to get the resource, we also need to be able to show and demonstrate to donors that we have a plan, that we're leveraging each other, that we're not just doing this in an isolated way, but that we can actually leverage our resources, our energy, our expertise, and access funding for organization to contribute. So I completely agree. Without that, we're always limited.
Great. I'm conscious of time because I can see we're at the end of our time for today. So I think we'll have to wrap this discussion up, but it would be really great for people to, so we'll share the Jamboards, and it would be great for people to add in additional information. And then I think in terms of next steps, taking it forward, we had talked in the last meeting about having a small group of volunteers to look at that prioritization exercise together. Is that, I'm just looking at Florence and Becky now, is that still our plan? Are we still looking for volunteers to work on that together? Yeah. So that would be really great. Anyone who's interested in helping us with that prioritization exercise and looking at the really key opportunities and our capacity to engage with them, please do email the conveners.
Sorry, I've muted myself again. And thinking about what your organization would want to commit to driving forward, because I think, you know, it needs to be different agencies moving different things and then bringing us along so that we are greater than the sum of our, you know, our parts. That coordination and collaboration is important. But it can't just be up to a few people, that there has to be people driving this work forward. It's just, otherwise it's not sustainable. Oh, I love your cat, Florence. It just makes me happy.
He's lovely, but overwhelming. And to add to this, it's recognizing that some organizations, as Greg and I said, may not have the funding. And then, okay, if it's a priority, then we need to be thinking how we can access that funding for this organization to lead. So it's not just based on whether you already have the capacity or not. Realistically. So just to be saying that. The other thing is, just as we close, to say we also, as last time, produced a kind of small UN advocacy updates. I'm going to share it here. So it's building, not repeating what we did in the last one, but just so that people, you know, can see what are some of the opportunities that are happening at the events or the new documents and so on. If you find these useful, let us know. It's probably not completed. There are things that are missing you want to add. It's a shared document, add them. But it's just to flag that there is this whole world of, you know, of mechanisms and events and so on. And making sure that we're aware, including, as Caroline pointed out, we're aware of countries that are coming up at the Committee on the Rights of the Child, or the Committee on the Rights of Person with Disability to be examined, because that's also really part of the implementation and obligation of states. So thank you. Over to Becky.
Well, thank you all. And it was wonderful to hear from all of you. And a good combination. I think we've been trying to think about how to structure these meetings. And I think having, you know, a small bit of updates, but also really trying to think about what we can do together is a nice way forward. If you do have topics for future discussions, do let us know. And it's great to see you all. I hope that you're surviving the end of the year rush, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.